Welcome to Tell the Story, the podcast where we delve into resilience, transformation, and the courage to thrive after a life of service. I'm your host, Doug White, a veteran, retired first responder, and author of Hiding in Plain Sight, the truth about trauma, service, and the way forward. Before we dive into today's episode, I'd like to thank our sponsors who make this episode possible. First, Polestar Coffee, and my friend Tyler Huckett, a veteran-owned, small-batch specialty coffee roaster dedicated to bring you the finest ethically sourced beans roasted to perfection. Whether you're starting your day or seeking an afternoon pick-me-up, Polestar Coffee offers a variety of blends to suit every palate. Explore their selection and order online today at polestarcoffee.com. If you're in the Boston area and seeking top-tier group or individual training for your police department, fire department, or personal fitness goals, look no further than Team FrogFit. Founded by Nick Sanchez, a former Navy SEAL and BUDS instructor, now known as Coach Nick. Team FrogFit offers unparalleled fitness coaching designed to elevate your performance and well-being. To connect with Coach Nick and be greater than yesterday's you, follow them on Instagram at Team FrogFit. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Today, we're joined by Erin Nugent, also known as Erin Jane. Erin is a mom of 2 young boys and married to a career firefighter. She's also a former detective, senior constable with the Victoria Police in Australia. She's a crisis counselor, master certified life coach, and the host of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. Most recently, has become a radio host and DJ on the Thin Line Rock station. Erin can be found there every Tuesday and Thursday from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern. Erin has dedicated her life to supporting first responders and their families, drawing from her own experiences as a law enforcement officer and the spouse of a firefighter. In this episode, we're going to explore Erin's journey from policing to coaching, her advocacy for mental health, and the lessons she's learned about resilience, perseverance, growth, and healing. Erin Jane, welcome to Tell This Story. Good morning. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I cannot complain. It's actually, we have a cold front coming through. It's supposed to rain a little bit here.
Oh, really?
It's going to get to the 30s.
Oh, I think it was 20 or 21 Fahrenheit, which I'm not good with Fahrenheit. It's just freaking cold.
Yeah. You've been here, like 11 years and you still are doing the Celsius and Fahrenheit?
First of all, I have not been here for 11 years, so back off.
Well, we're going to get into that.
Yeah, I know. No, I'm a staunch Celsius girl, so you can take your Fahrenheit and do something with it.
Okay. Well, you know what? Since you've mentioned Fahrenheit and Celsius, I'll get rid of the Fahrenheit thing. And I'll say this episode is brought to you by Celsius. The best drink to have when you're on midnight shift.
Oh, there you go.
So anyway, good morning.
Okay. Good morning, Doug.
So I am so glad that you're here. And before we get started, I was trying to figure out, and I think I know the answer. How did we connect? I know it was through Instagram because I was following your show for a bit. And then the book. Was it? Yeah. Did you reach out saying something about the book?
I think so. Yeah. So I think I reached out to you. I'd been I think I followed you and looked at some of your stuff, and I really value genuineness in people, and I just got that very genuine, authentic vibe from you, and then I purchased your book, and I just might have sent you a message and was like, hey, following your stuff, really liking it, and I just bought your book and looking forward to reading it. So I think that might be where we connected.
I think so. That sounds familiar.
Yeah. And then was it then that I asked you to come on the podcast, perhaps? But I think I wanted to read your book first. I think that was maybe the roundabout answer of what you just asked. Sorry.
That is. Oh, and by the way, for everybody listening, if you weren't paying attention during the intro, Erin is currently in the Boston area.
I am.
But that's not a Boston accent.
No.
She's from Australia.
I am.
So anyway, yeah, I read your intro. People know kind of about you. If they've heard your podcast, they know a lot more about you, but hopefully we're going to learn even more about you today.
Looking forward to it.
Tell us, who is Erin?
Oh, Jesus. Okay. So I was a police officer and detective back home in Australia. I worked for a state police force called Victoria Police. We don't have all of the tiny little police forces like America does. We have sort of one per state, and then we have the Australian Federal Police. So yeah, I worked for the state of Victoria. I did that for roughly 9 years, I think, and and I find myself in Boston because I was traveling through Europe, and ran into a very handsome American firefighter when I was over there. And we, yeah, met and married in 9 months. And yes, I know that sounds crazy. But 10 or almost 11 years later, and two beautiful kids, and still going strong. So yeah, we sort of spent the first couple of years long distance, and then I resigned and moved over here permanently, and I think it was 2015, maybe something like that. So yeah, so then I've been here ever since, and I worked for a crisis counselling and suicide prevention organisation when I got here. First in a volunteer capacity, and then when I had my work permission, I became a supervisor there. So answering calls, monitoring the calls and texts and conversations between other volunteers and people reaching out for help. And yeah, so that was that. And then, going to try to condense it down as much as I possibly can. But yeah, so then had my two boys, who are now 8 and 5. And sort of when the youngest was little, I kind of just was very much, what do I want to do with the rest of my life, the rest of my career? I'd sort of stopped working at the suicide prevention place, just because of life circumstances, and just was looking for something, because I feel that it's important to lead by example with my kids, and whilst I've sort of being home with them for the majority of the time, I think it's important that, especially having boys, that they see me, studying, working, being active and fit, just kind of showing them that example of, it's important to better yourself, to educate yourself, to stay fit, stay healthy, have good coping skills, all of that kind of stuff. So then I went down the path of becoming a life coach. So I went through an organization that is, affiliated and accredited with the International Coaching Federation, and became a master certified life coach. Since getting that qualification, I've also done a trauma-informed certification too. And I really just, my life is still heavily involved in the first responder community. Like I'm, obviously married to an active duty firefighter who's been on the job for, I was like 22, 23 years now, I think. And, lots of firefighter friends, and lots of my friends back home are still coppers. And I think there is, I think there's a gap in service. I think, there's a wonderful community which, peer support can provide help for people when they need to talk to someone. And then additionally, like up on the higher echelons, there is obviously clinical services. I think there's a really big void in the middle that I think a lot of people can get lost in.
The vast gray area.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you've been on my website, clearly. So, yeah, and I think just sort of offering people another option, another place to come and speak to someone who has a level of understanding of what it's like to be a first responder, as well as what it's like to be married to one, because both of those sides of the coin can be quite unique. And I sort of just try to sort of bring that insight into it. So I've been doing that for the last few years. God, how far am I into it now? been studying psychology for the last few years. Oh, probably the last two, because I love my coaching, and it just kind of really made me go, okay, I want to take this further. So the end goal is to, hopefully become a therapist and treat trauma in first responders. But that's still a little ways off. So just studying psychology and learning as I go along. I host the podcast, I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. It's a first responder mental health podcast, which you were a lovely, lovely guest on. And
I was going to save that for the outro.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, episode 41 that aired December 20th.
There you go.
That's my favorite. Start there and work your way back.
Yeah, work backwards. That's fine. I'm even on board with that. I think if I dared let myself go back to either watch or listen the first episode, I'd probably cringe and like delete it from the internet. So, and then I most recently, back in November 2024, through another lovely guest that I had on the podcast, I learnt about and met the owner of the Thin Line Rock Station, and they were looking for new hosts, and they were like, hey, we'll give you 2 shows a week. I was like, okay. So I do that too, and it's so much fun. It's such a joy. There are so many things so many different aspects that I get to do, which kind of interrelate with the first responder community, that I find myself so incredibly fortunate and privileged, because I get to have conversations like this. I get to, help coaching clients. I get to learn the, psychological and physiological things behind everything with my studies. It's I'm very lucky. My life is full, but it's full in a really, really beautiful way.
You sound very, very busy. Before we started recording, we talked about busyness, and
we did
just life's silliness and the things that we do to ourselves to keep us busy. But
exactly.
I want to unpack so much of that.
I know. I just went. Sorry.
No. I still have such a problem being excited with stuff. Like when I would teach, okay?
Yeah.
Prime example, and I was awful at this. I would get very passionate about the subject, and I would just get excited and start giving examples and forget about the PowerPoint that's over here somewhere behind me. I'm like 3 slides ahead. Everybody's feverishly taking notes. I'm sorry, I did it to you again.
Yeah.
Back up. I just get excited about this, and I want to tell you everything. And
I know.
So I'm excited. I want to talk so much about the Thin Line Rock Station, but I want to go all the way back.
All the way back, sure.
So, let's talk about young Erin in Australia.
Oh, now, Jesus. Okay.
Yeah. So just silly, everybody thinks down under. I knew about Australia through Men at Work, the old rock band.
Yeah.
We're going to bring this full circle back to Thin Line Rock Station and the music that you play.
No doubt. Exactly. So, my bosses like to throw that one into my catalog most shows that I do.
It's awesome. I don't know what a Vegemite sandwich is. We didn't have the interwebs back in 83. I couldn't look that up.
I know, right?
So I know people aren't silly. Well, there are probably people that are silly enough in this world, but nobody listening to this station will think that, you just walk outside, throw a saddle on a kangaroo, and off you go into the sunset. But What was it like growing up in Australia?
It was, it's as idyllic as, you can fathom. Like, unfortunately, my father passed away when I was very little. So I was raised by my mum, and I have an older brother and an older sister. So my mum worked really hard and really provided a beautiful example that, hard work just kind of gets you there, and perhaps, just because you're a woman doesn't mean that you can't change a tire or fix a like fuse wire in the fuse box, or all of those kinds of things. Like it was a struggle, But, everyone does their best. And, my brother and I were very close growing up. He sort of tortured me somewhat. He says in a
It's
lighthearted
the
way.
job of an older brother.
Oh, exactly. And he used to, torture me in all kinds of ways. But he was like, well, clearly I toughened you up for your career. I'm like, okay, you can take credit for that, Juzzy, no worries. And my sister is 7 years older. So I really had that beautiful idealized version of someone to look up to. And she is a psychiatrist back home in Australia and actually works at a trauma foundation where more recently, she's helping sort of military veterans, first responders, all that kind of thing. So it's she basically kind of has my dream job. So there's some tension there, but in a good way.
Well, that's fantastic. That sounds like some great examples. Was it just the great examples of strength that led you into police work, or how did that come about?
I don't honestly really know. Like, no one in my family was involved in law enforcement. My grandfather on my maternal side, he was a World War II veteran. And I just, I don't know. I think it kind of came to me when I was about 19, maybe. But I thought I was too young. And I thought to myself, if I still feel really passionately about joining the police force when I'm 21, so in 2 years' time, I will go ahead with it. So I worked 2 jobs and just, had fun, as, young 19, 20 something year olds do. And at 21, I still, really wanted to head in that direction. So I did, and was fortunate enough to be accepted into the academy, and the rest of my life went in that direction.
Is that where your experiences there, like through childhood, through law enforcement, and all that stuff? Is that what led you into to crisis counseling and coaching, more especially crisis counseling?
Yeah. So I mentioned briefly that my father passed away when I was little. He died by suicide. So I don't sort of have any memories of him, really. And there's maybe 3 photographs in existence of us together. And that loss was something that sort of shaped me a lot. And I guess it's probably weird to say that the loss of someone that you can't remember can shape you, but I guess I was shaped by his absence, more than his presence. And it was something that I definitely wrestled with a lot, especially during like my teenage years. I was left with the misconception, but it took a long time to realize and recognize that I got left sort of feeling like I wasn't worth sticking around for. And no one told me that, but it's kind of, I guess, what I read into that situation. And that was before I had the worldliness and the insight and the knowledge to understand that someone struggling in that way with suicidal ideation or thoughts or intentions, they're not kind of thinking, unfortunately, about that kind of thing. So, and obviously I dealt a lot with either people struggling with suicidal ideation or threatening self-harm, and also attending completed suicide crime scenes when I was a police officer. And so after my husband and I first got married, I came over to the States for 6 months. I was still employed with the police, but I just took leave. And I'm not kind of person, I can't really just sit around doing nothing. So I was looking for volunteer opportunities, and that was the one that I came across. And I was like, yep, there's a reason I've come across it. This is the right one for me. And I'd always sort of wanted to, we have something similar called Lifeline back home in Australia that I'd always sort of wanted to engage in and volunteer on, but to go through the training, the time commitment, I just, as a police officer, I never sort of had that time. So so that was kind of, I think I've done a lot of things throughout my life that have helped in a healing process of reconciling, my father's death, and that's definitely one of them. And just going through all of like the different stages, and just now coming at it from a place of just profound empathy and compassion for a man who was 32. And, that's the same age that I started, my family. I actually gave birth to my first child on my 32nd birthday. And that was quite like a reckoning moment for me, because I was like, oh my goodness, I'm overwhelmed with love right now for this baby that I'm holding. And my father was at such a crisis point in his life that he, chose to leave it when he himself had 3 children. So it really just wiped away any kind of anger or either disappointment or confusion or anything like that. I just went, wow, he must have been in a lot of pain to make that choice. And so I just kind of come at it from that perspective now, and in the content I put out and the conversations that I have with people like you, a lot of people come on my podcast and talk to me about their similar experiences. And it's something that, I will sometimes share with a guest. It's like hearing another man, and in particular a father, wrestle with that suicidal ideation and be potentially really, really close to it, to taking their life and choosing to make a different choice, and choosing to live and struggle through everything that they're going through. It heals someone like me, whose parent was struggling in like the 80s when mental health wasn't a thing, especially mental health directed at men. So I just, I am one person, but I just try to share my story, so that I can be a voice and a face to people who have lost someone, and to perhaps like to people who are contemplating it, just to kind of go, I'm an example. I can talk to you about the effects that it has, and implore you to make a different choice.
Well, there's first, I know that had to be difficult, and thank you so much for sharing that.
That's okay.
Yeah, I did not know all of that. I knew quite a bit.
Yeah.
But when you sent back the bio sheet last week, and I started looking through, I was like, how did I miss that? I had to go all the way back to episode 1, and you hit it very quickly and gone.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing that. And I had no idea, and this brings a lot of layers to who is Erin, and why you do what you do. I can't think of a better origin story and a why. So thank you for sharing that with us. That's pretty
okay.
freaking awesome. So I know why you're doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You went back and got your, I'm going to say this wrong because I know nothing about the whole life coaching thing, but you got your trauma informed certification specifically to work with first responders?
No, so I was already working with first responders, but I'm such a giant nerd. I was on a study break in between, was it in between universities, I think? So I switched over last year. So it was just last American summer. I think I had like 6 or 8
America.
weeks.
You don't have to say American
summer.
It's
I know.
Summer.
Shut up.
So this is American winter. This is Australian summer. So in case people don't realize the whole
Yes.
the poles and all
The
that stuff.
whole
The
hemisphere
hemisphere
thing.
thing, yeah. What's a
um
hemisphere? Oh my goodness.
oh. So yeah, and I'd actually had this thing saved for probably over 12 months and hadn't had the time to do it. And it was this the organization is called the Center for Healing, and they have all kinds of different courses and stuff that you can do. And they had this trauma-informed coaching one. And I'm like, well, I'm, got a few weeks of no study on my hands. What can I do? Some more study. So and I found it just, it was a very sort of uh not basic, but as in it covered the stuff that it covered, but it I I'm a giant nerd. I love to learn. And I've always been fascinated by psychology. So the understanding why we do things, and in particular how trauma affects us, because you've got, say, people thinking about how trauma affects our minds. Well, it also significantly affects our bodies. And if anyone out there, which I'm sure that many have, Bessel's powerful book, The Body Keeps the Score, like it's so important to understand that it affects everyone in different ways, but it can present equally in different ways. So basically anything that I can read, watch, listen to, that I can get my hands on to understand how trauma affects people, because we inherently do jobs that expose us to chronic cumulative trauma. So I see that in the people that I talk to. I see that in myself and my own experiences. I see it in my husband, so I kind of think, so just quick side note, the reason that I called my my company or my business Erin Jane Coaching, it's my first and middle name, so no huge guesses there, but my maternal grandmother, who I refer to as my nana, she had a big beautiful heart, and she was the one who called me Erin Jane, and I was very, very close to her. And I think that I inherited her heart, and I feel like my empathy and my level of compassion, it's kind of like a superpower. And that might sound terrible, but it's kind of how I view it. I do feel very, very strong empathy and compassion for people, but without it negatively impacting me. So I think
that's the superpower.
Yeah, yes, actually, that's probably a good point. So, basically doing anything I can to get more knowledge, get more experience, get more education about learning how to support people who are in those terrible places or who are impacted in that way. And right now, so back then I did it as a police officer, and then I did it as a crisis counselor. Now I do it as a coach, and hopefully one day we'll do it as a therapist. So I have my different capacities, and also, I do it as a friend and all that kind of thing. It's really a strong part of my life and who I am as a person, because relationships and connections and all that kind of thing, they mean a lot to me. And if you're my friend, you know that. And loyalty is big for me, compassion is big for me, and it's kind of what I try to put into every aspect of my life, I guess. So
well, it shows in the podcast and the way that you speak with people. And
thank you.
Yeah, back circling way back to the authenticity thing. You certainly have it.
Thank you.
With your inner nerd, you are going to go crazy when you get your copy of Operator Syndrome.
Oh my God. I'm like, I know, I think it might be even getting like delivered today. So I'm trying to think I think it was Travis Gribble posted something about it. And this probably was like a couple of months ago. And I actually wrote the what's it called, the title and his name down on like a little post-it, and it's been sitting on my desk for months. And then I saw you, and I was,
I have a problem with this book. And
you
as I
do?
said,
Oh my goodness.
well, I do that with a lot of books. I turn regular books into textbooks, and I mean, he's got his own hour and 47-minute episode, which actually will drop tomorrow. But I'm doing a whole series on the physiological impacts of our work. You're going to love it. You're going to love the episode. Everybody else is going to love the episode.
Super excited.
And stealing Erin Jane time and giving Dr. Free more time.
That's okay.
His book is a treasure map. It gave a name to everything that I was experiencing and showed me the way forward. And it was just the very end of March. I think it was March 26th of 24 that his book came out. So although the information is not new, the impact on me is relatively new. But you're going to love that. Enough of the nerd stuff and somebody else's episode. But
that's all right.
For people that are listening to us, I'm trauma informed. I mean, we hear a lot about cultural competence lately, and I actually heard it first from Travis Gribble about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's the first person that said it, but I heard it from him first. And then Jason Palomera and Barbara Bell, all the books. So trauma informed. What is trauma informed, and why is that important to us who are seeking counseling? And also the follow-up question that is, why would that be important to our leadership to understand what that is?
So again, I will preface it by saying I'm not a therapist, so I'm going to, probably give a bit more of like a layman's
You'll
explanation.
be able to explain it to us then.
Exactly. I mean, for me personally, I think it is important because when you are dealing with either veterans or first responders in any kind of healing or helping capacity, I think there needs to be a level of understanding of the jobs that we do and the effects that it has on us psychologically, physiologically, emotionally, spiritually, like that real holistic viewpoint, because nothing happens in a vacuum. Nothing exists in a vacuum. So, I can go to the doctors or therapist and be like, how you doing? And you're like, yeah, I'm fine. But, your heart might be racing. You might be experiencing any other kinds of symptoms, and that if one thing isn't getting linked to the other, then we're not going to be getting treated appropriately and in the way that we need to be. So that, to me, that the cultural competence is understanding the work that we do. And, and I never, ever, and I hope it never comes across as like that, is just because of my policing experience that I'm ever going to understand, completely someone else's experience, because I don't. But it does help me, I feel, understand and have an insight that may be a little more than someone else who hasn't. The same way as I don't know everyone's unique relationship and dynamic of being married to a first responder. I understand mine, and I think it gives me a little bit of insight, but what works for one isn't always going to work for another. And I'm very respectful of that. It's really just trying to use anything and everything that I've ever come across or experienced or utilize and use that to help others. So for me, being trauma informed is having a very good understanding of how it affects us and therefore how it can present too.
Absolutely. Very well said. So the vast gray area that you speak about, what can we do, you and I, with our platforms, be they what they are, and, speaking and talking to leadership, what message can we be bringing to them? And I should probably set this up a little bit better with context, but I believe that a change in the first responder culture is going to not necessarily be driven from the top. I believe this is going to be the onesies and twosies and the agencies standing up and saying, I have a problem. This is what I've done to fix myself. Follow me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and of course, then it's going to be a bottom up, top down, full concerted effort. But what can we do? I say I've made the decision, whatever it is, I've crossed the barrier of entry and raised my hand and say, I need help. Where do we go from there to cross that, to, I guess, close the divide, that gray area?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'm not necessarily going to have all of the answers, but I do understand where you're coming from in terms of seeing it. It may end up being that little bit more of like a groundswell,
Mm-hmm.
as like I mean, I think it does come with people in leadership positions recognizing that many people are struggling. And I think the suicide numbers for first responders is indicative of that. I think, and I have a lot of conversations about this, obviously, I think some of it starts from educating our people even before they get on the job. So at the inception, either going through academies or whatever, like that entry process is, I think there needs to be a more open and honest discussion and education of, and like we know that we're going to see awful shit. Like that is part of the job, and it is,
That's the part that we signed up for. We knew
yes,
that when we came
yes,
in.
yes, of course,
Mhm.
and yes, we just had a conversation about that beforehand
Brought that
offline.
up, yeah. You signed up for it, no, champ.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Get your blood pressure down.
But and it's not just educating the troops, it's educating their spouses, and I'm definitely a big advocate for that too, because we're the people who see the effects of the things that they do and they see at work, and offering that kind of education to the spouses. And it's not to say, this person will, but it's to say this person is at a higher risk of. These are the things they may go through. This is normal, but it's not normal after this period. Or it's normal because it's a human reaction to being exposed to trauma. But if it extends, if it, progresses, if it becomes that part where it is interfering with their daily existence, then we need to help them. So offering that education to not only the people who sign up, but their partners, spouses, families, whoever needs to be involved in that conversation, giving them and educating them with different coping skills and mechanisms from the get-go, whether it's yoga, whether it's mindfulness meditation, whether it's, just opening up their expanse to different coping skills and what they do to help bring them out of their sympathetic nervous system into the parasympathetic nervous system, giving them tools in real time to help them calm down. Because when they have either the knowledge of them or they practice them already, it's not leaving that person until they're in that state of crisis to be scrambling for an option. What was the other part of your question?
Well, I mean, you answered both there. The other question was, what can leadership do? And I think front loading this stuff in the academy, sharing this with the spouses and the partners or first responders. And I think that's going to do the trick. And there are, I probably should have given more grace in the beginning of this, but there are leaders out there.
Oh yeah,
that are doing this. I spoke with Chris Workman just a couple of weeks ago. He's the chief of police, and he's making a huge impact just by being a voice in a leadership position doing this stuff. So I always like to assume a positive intent, and I know that there are leaders out there that want to do the right thing and are trying to do the right thing. But I do believe the big lift or the heavy lift on this is going to be the groundswell. It's going to be the people that are experiencing this finally, using their voice and saying that this is an issue, and becoming a concerted voice to where the entire profession and all the first responder disciplines cannot avoid it. There's going to be no choice but to answer to it. And I think there's a lot of groundwork here, a lot of people that have done the work to show that these are the things, that are going to be effective and things we can do. And, to be honest with you, a lot of these things don't cost a lot of money.
Well, and that was kind of what was just buzzing through my head. Like, we can't let, and very much easier said than done. And I've never been in a position of leadership and authority at a department. So I'm not sitting here, castigating them in any way. But the health of our troops needs to not have a dollar sign. And I know that it does in terms of allowing for resources, but, are you really going to be able to live with yourself if you turn something down because it costs like a few $1,000s and then one of your troops ends up, dead?
Yeah, no, and I agree with that 100%. There's grants out there for Narcan, for God's sakes. I mean, there's a grant for things that can help us. Mm-hmm. I mean, having been in a leadership position and doing budgets and being involved with budgeting, there are things that can be done that are relatively inexpensive. Yeah. There are resources, there are books that you can buy for your personnel. Just here's a 30-minute block in the academy where we're going to bring somebody in on your lunch break to speak to you. And these things, they don't cost money. And the amount of money that is quite honestly pissed away on things that make here's a decal for your laptop, so when your laptop's up, it could see who the sheriff is as people you're pulling over.
You're like, okay.
I mean, I wish I was making that up, but there are things that our money could be, much better spent on, honestly.
Well, it's that, but it's also, and I know EAP can be which is what I'm saying. So some places do have good programs, but there needs to be buy-in from the troops because it actually has to work.
Yes.
So having access to like vetting the people that you have on there, not just like the, random therapists that agree to the job, like what is their qualifications, but what is their experience with firefighters, with people in law enforcement, with competence? Dispatchers. Exactly.
Are they trauma informed?
All of those kinds of things, I think, are important.
I agree with you 100%. And the EAP is wonderful. There are agencies out there. My former agency had all of the things. Mm-hmm. We had a support dog. We have an ice cream truck. We have all of the things, a teddy bear, the months, the YouTube channel. We have all of the outreach. And they really did a fantastic job having the infrastructure there. Mm-hmm. But if the culture is not there for somebody to raise their hand, they're not going to use it. Like the EAP. That's for when you want to go to marriage counseling or your kids are having problems with middle school. That's not for me.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you my experience, and I laid it out in the book, and I've been very graceful in the way that I've spoken about it thus far. But the culture was just not there. And I've had young deputies have a hard time do some things that would buckle any human being, especially a lesser person than these people were. Mm-hmm. And they took a knee. They raised their hand and said, "Hey, I need a minute here." And the conversations that were being had behind their back in the break rooms were just awful. And those are a one-off. But when you're not getting support from your immediate supervisors or your chain of command, or even on the executive level. Anyway, the money is always there is really the point that I'm trying to make in all of this. They just have to make it a priority. And if you make it a priority, taking care of your personnel, having a culture, starting a culture, or investing in a culture in your organization that values their personnel, the longevity of their personnel, making sure your people are whole, creating an environment that is, I don't want to say the word inclusive because people are going to think DEI. That's not what I mean. But inclusive to where it values every individual contribution, where people are empowered to make decisions, to do their jobs, to earn the money that you're actually paying them. I mean, for God's sakes, you're giving them a gun and fire. They get a hose. You can drown people. Anyway, I got to take a shot at a firefighter. Anyway, you're requiring these people to do this job for this long amount of time, and you're giving them the authority to make life and death decisions, because what we do is sometimes unforgiving. I mean, it is life and death. So with that, there needs to be a priority in making sure your people are whole. And I fully believe, and I have no data to back this up. This is just me speaking now. I believe that if you do that and create a culture there, your retention issues are going to solve themselves. Your recruitment is going to resolve itself, because now you have a workforce of people that are telling family members and friends that this is the Google or first responder worlds. We have nap pods and all of this and all wonderful things. And it won't take long. It won't take long. It'll take somebody from leadership with the moral courage to stand up and say, this is my story. This is where we're going, and be damned everything else, But the business of law enforcement and firefighting and EMS and dispatchers it's always going to take care of itself, even with shit leadership. We saw that, and I should preface this because somebody's going to hear this clip and take it out of context. What happened in New Orleans on Bourbon Street?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about attack methodology. I'm not talking about warning signs or things to mitigate that. What I will talk about is that we saw footage of the police officers at that scene running to the problem. Period. It's what we do. It's what we're supposed to do. Firefighters running into burning buildings to save babies. It's what they do. They will always do their job because it's who they are. It's what they've been called to do. That's what we've signed up for. That's what we understand. We run to the fire and to the gunshots. But when you have a superintendent of a law enforcement agency who can't speak to what it is that their people do and look like a complete dope on television, it's not inspiring me to believe that people in those positions, in that position of authority, are really the best people to be there. So anyway, moral courage, strong leadership, and that's what's going to change the culture. That and the groundswell.
That, but also mandate yearly wellness visits.
Yes.
With a, and I don't want to sound like I'm self-serving, but with a coach, with a therapist, with anyone in a helping capacity that they can have access to. If you mandate it, it means you pay them for that hour once a year. And will people push against it? Of course.
Initially, yeah, they will.
Initially, but the way that, and I'm not coming up with this, this is, something I know Travis Gribble talks about it, a lot of people talk about it and about implementing it and how important it is. But the way that I look at it too is that it creates a relationship between that coach, that therapist, clinician, whoever. It means that they're a known quantity. And you know what? If it was me and you're at your wellness visit and you're like, I'm all good, or you're resistant or whatever, you know what? Come into my office and talk shit to me for 55 minutes. Let's just shoot the shit. Who cares? Talk about footy. Talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. But then you're going to know me. You're going to know who I am. You're going to know how I operate. I'm going to have an idea of you, perhaps know whether you're married, whether you have children, whether you're caring for an elderly relative, all of that kind of basically dossier information, so that when you perhaps are struggling, you might be less resistant if we already have established a bit of a relationship, and you might be more willing to come and talk to them. And we're not starting from zero.
I agree with that 100%. And I think even a bigger picture thing, even if I'm not coming to the same person each year, I'm doing it each year. So now it becomes something I'm used to. And,
Mm-hmm.
I have time to think about, hey, that wasn't so bad. Next year is even less and less and less. And, you know, the annual checkups, I like that because we do all of this. We do the polygraph, we do the psych eval, we do the medical checks and all that stuff. We have to run a mile and a half and do the push-ups. But when we leave, give me your shit. Here's some cake
Yeah.
that you paid for. Now piss off.
Yeah.
There's no out process that's mandated for medical or emotional support. And I think that if we do it in the beginning and we do it at least annually, um, like get your blood work done. At least, we're not keeping track of that as an organization. They're not
Mm-hmm.
keeping track of that as an organization, but you are. You know where you're going throughout that. You're going to be informed. And at the end of your career, you do it again and say, okay, this is where I was, midway and all this other stuff, whether it's 10 or 30 years, at least you have an idea of what it is you're working with, and you can mitigate those things or do what you can to make sure that your physical fitness and your emotional fitness is being taken care of through that. Again, I believe one of the greatest jobs of being a law enforcement executive or being in a leadership position is to ensure your people are whole, whatever that looks like. And I think that Dr. Free said it during the episode that we did together, placing the physiological in front of the emotional, looking at that, because the it keeps the score. We may have had different experiences. I wasn't a firefighter. I've been into a burning building once, and I didn't like it at all, enough to know that I wasn't going to do it again. But even though our experiences are different or even adjacent, our bodies, they do not know the difference between the two. We're going to respond and react the same way to those negative inputs, whatever they are. So I think there's a baseline there, and I'm doing some thinking into those areas, and hopefully we'll come up with something soon. But I think, again, enough of our voices, it's going to be deafening, and they can't say no.
And can I say, it's you and I sitting here having this conversation, there are so many people swimming in this pool that are all trying to do and implement the same things. I've, just having conversations with, some wonderful people last week that coming at it from slightly different perspectives, or that their input or their impact and the way that they're going about it is different. But so many people are trying to cause that groundswell or help that groundswell along. So it's
great. And I want to say something. I know I will hold space for your darkness from you. That comes from a Brene Brown quote.
Sure does.
I like a lot of her work. Of course, Michelle is a big fan, and she also loves Mel Robbins. But anyway, the point I'm making to that is, there's 800,000 cops roughly, and there's a lot of firefighters. I mean, they have a calendar, so I don't know exactly how many, because I only see 12 a year when I get my calendar in the mail.
You're admitting to subscribing to the calendar, though. So,
well, somebody signed me up for it.
Yeah, sure they do.
I giggle every year. Like, God, you guys don't wear shirts? Anyway. So where were we? Oh, yes. Firefighters.
Shitting on firefighters.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, and I know your husband will back this up. We beat each other up, and it's a professional big brother, little brother thing.
Yeah.
We're the big brothers. But nobody else better mess with a firefighter, and nobody else better mess with a cop, because we are the same. We are the same, and we'll mess with each other, but damn it, when it comes down to it, you'll find no better friend.
Exactly.
But what I was saying is there's 800,000 cops out there, and not everybody is going to respond to my message. My experiences, Travis Gribble's experiences, Jason Palomera's experiences, everybody has an experience, and they're going to attack a problem, at least initially, until they learn more and more and more. And as I'm learning more and more, they're going to approach it from their perspective with their story and what worked for them. And as I said, there's 800,000 cops. There's 800,000 different ways to attack this.
Yeah.
So while, Brene Brown may not be speaking exactly to me based on experiences. I find value in her work, and I can find pieces there,
Yeah.
along with Mel Robbins, along with Jocko Willink, Sean Ryan, Joe Rogan. I mean, there's so many voices out there that even recently have been talking about just this thing, that there's enough voices, enough sound being made, and enough perspectives being brought into the same end,
Yeah.
that there's someone out there that is going to speak to you.
Yes.
Find them.
Well, and
there's no shortage of it.
And that kind of actually quite succinctly explains why I do like life and wellness coaching for first responders, because there needs to be options out there. And I'm by no means like the only one. I know that you're friendly with and spoken with, is it Jess Flores? And she's a transition coach for, law enforcement officers leaving the job. There are so many out there. So I am in no way means alone in any respect, but giving people other options. And sometimes I look at coaching, it's like, it can seem a little less imposing to people who are used to being in control and in charge. And when you engage with, or the style of coaching that I do, you're in control. You're in charge of what we talk about. You tell me what you want to work on, and then we're going to work on it together. And I'm going to support you and keep you accountable and help you reach those goals, along with, showing you that empathy and that compassion, and really just helping you delve into the person that you want to be and helping you get there. But so I think there's that, the idea of therapy, the people lying on the couch and someone talking about their feelings and all that kind of thing. And that's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. So giving them the other options of coming in and talking to me, or talking to any of the other coaches that are out there, speaking to someone at peer support, finding your own coping skills, doing, meditation, whatever it is. But coping effectively generally means you have to find the thing that works for you.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And you will, if you find it on the first try, good job. I didn't. I mean, this has been quietly a 5-year journey for me, and more vocally about a 1.5-year journey. And I've learned more in the previous, goodness. Well, Dr. Free's book gave me the starting point, but learning more about my voice, and then I had a voice, my Scotland trip. So June of this year is really when everything, I put on the big boy pants and decided that why not? Let's do this. So one of the things that I wanted to focus on in talking with you before we wrap up, and you have to go off and do Erin Jane things. The the first responder spouses. We talked on episode 41, brilliant episode 41 of I'll Hold Space for Your Darkness.
Yes.
You peeled back some layers, and you came out swinging on that episode, and you talked about the dedication of the book. And I believe that was actually the first thing that you let off with when you contacted me.
I did.
The first line of my book, it is my opinion, and I firmly believe this, based on my own experience, that the spouses of first responders are the brave and the bold. There's really no more. If you want to hear more, get the book or listen to episode 41. I prefer you get the book. But
hey, do both. Do both, people.
Do both. Yeah, it's fine.
Do both.
It's fine, because listening to episode 41 will draw you back to the book. So,
exactly.
Michelle's role in my journey and my healing cannot be overstated ever. And I firmly believe that the spouses of first responders are actively, they love us. They're bound to us. They're bound to our service, and they are actively looking for ways to help and to support. You're sort of a ringer in that you have the experience of law enforcement, you have the experience of trauma coaching, you're married to a first responder, you're in this space. I mean, you have your finger in pretty much every circle that needs to be touched on this. And
That sounds a little creepy, Doug.
well, no, but I mean,
I'm kidding.
you're well rounded in that you've attacked everything that you need to and that you see the problems in. And we've talked about bridging the gap between organization and responder and responders, and there's a big gap in how we as men speak to each other, and even a bigger gap in how we speak to ourselves. But in our own homes, I've heard people say from one end of stay the hell away from your first responder, let them come to you. I don't know that that's really the answer. Talking to Medina Baumgart, she and her husband have the 10-minute rule.
I
love
was
it.
reading that. Yeah,
that is the way, because that's the code word. You know that
yeah.
it's been a day, and everybody understands coming into it that there's going to be a disengagement period that you have to have and respect that for each other.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that because we have, in my own example, my cultural competent counselor sits 18 inches away from me on a couch most evenings. My culturally competent counselor, my culturally competent first responder, holds my hand when we walk through the neighborhoods, has paid attention to every sleeping and waking moment and every breath I've taken for the last 24 plus years. If anyone has earned the right to help, to be there, who deserves a whole spouse, it's them. What is it that we need to do as the responder to give them that opportunity? And I know the answer is open and honest communication, but I mean, how do we do that? I mean, how have you done, if, and I know this is a personal question, but
All good.
how is this done in your house? I mean, how are you working on this?
I mean, thank you for the question and the acknowledgement of spouses, because it gets lost. Our role in everything gets lost a lot sometimes, and I find myself fortunate because I do know what it's like on both sides. And again, speaking just from my dynamic, like, so my husband was was and continues to be a firefighter, but was a firefighter for maybe 12 years or something before we ever met, before I ever came on the scene. So I don't necessarily walk into his life expecting him to change the way that he copes. But it's definitely like an ongoing process. Number one of the most important things that I've ever, I guess, gone through the process of is learning as the spouse not to take their moods personally. Because that was definitely something that I used to do, in the early days of our marriage. And it's hard not to, but you kind of take it and you internalize it, and then it's not helpful, but it's generally not accurate. Like, you internalizing, oh, I must have done something wrong. It's like, no, they on it, like, not the fact that they're not thinking about you, but as in they're actually kind of just not. They're in their own little world about whatever's going on, and maybe what they're presenting to you isn't the happiest face, or the most talkative side of them, but not internalizing that, I think, is probably the number one thing that I think is really important for spouses to know. And it is in terms of having that open and honest conversation, but it can sometimes just be just one conversation in terms of, I love you, I want to support you in the best way that I can. Tell me how to do that. Because equally, and sometimes your first responder might not know, and it may have to be a bit of an ongoing learning process. But figuring out the best way to support them in the way that they need. So we talk about like our love languages, right? Like what I need and what your spouse needs might be two very different things. And if my way of showing love to my partner isn't the way that they need me to support them, then you're going to kind of end up in conflict and be resentful and irritated with each other. So we do very, very minor things in my household. Obviously, as a firefighter, my husband does 24-hour shifts. He comes home and he's tired. So I do little things like we have a sauna in our basement, and to try to mitigate, his risk of cancer and getting all the carcinogens and shit out of his system, I, will get up at 6 a.m. and turn the sauna on for him. So he has that option when he gets home, that it's raring to go. I have him, annoyingly so, with all of the research about the physiological, reactions on our body of stress and all that kind of thing. I've got him on like a vitamin regime. So he comes home from work. I filled up a water bottle and got like the, specific vitamins that I'm encouraging him to take to help flush all of that kind of stuff out of his system. It's just getting eyes on him when he walks through the door, because of that long-standing love and deep knowledge of that person. You can sometimes tell what kind of night he's had just by the look in his eyes or his body language or anything like that. Or could have shot me a text message that morning, I don't know. But his priority when he gets home is to get FaceTime with our boys. So I sort of make sure that happens. And then I offer to, make him something to eat or anything like that. And basically just, gauge it depending on kind of what I'm reading from him. And it's not walking around on eggshells. It's just being, I think, from our, dynamic, just being supportive of what he may need in that moment. And every day is different, but it's a work in progress. But, sometimes people have that downtime, to a bit of a drive, and they can decompress. My husband's station, I think it's maybe like a 7-minute drive. So he doesn't necessarily get a massive decompression time. He grabs a coffee on his way home. I know that extends it and all that kind of thing. And we're both cognizant of any impact on our kids in that respect, in terms of him coming home in a mood or anything like that. My husband is a freaking awesome bloke, and he is, pretty even keeled, but he's not immune to being exhausted and burnt out and all of those kinds of things. So I really just, the depths of our marriage, it's really just about supporting each other. And I don't know if I think it's Brene, and I think Mel Robbins talks about it too. It's about the percentage we have when we show up. And sometimes I need to be the 80 because he's only got 20. Sometimes it's 50-50, it's 60-40, it's all that kind of thing. And you know what? I even had a realization just that last past year, right? My husband's a hunter. And talking about everyone having different coping skills and mechanisms and things that are a stress relief and all that kind of thing. My husband's been a hunter his whole life. And we, gone through stages of, he'd be away, cool, no worries. He's away with one kid, cool, no worries. He's away when I've got 2 kids at home. That can lead to a little bit of resentment every now and then when all of his hobbies and his work take him away. And we worked on sort of just a little bit of acknowledgement that I help facilitate that, and that's fine. And we've been good. But the thing that I realized was hunting for him is like his therapy. He gets to go out into the woods. He's alone. He gets to sit. He gets to think. He has to learn to be quiet again. He just is out in nature, doing something that he really loves. And it kind of made me go, oh, like this isn't just something that you enjoy doing and it's a hobby. This is actually something that you need to do.
Yeah.
And it took just for me like this past year, to have that recognition and be like, oh, cool, I'm legitimately, and not that I really often do, but there will never be a part of me that ever resents him going hunting from now on, because now I actually understand the significance for him. And that was really powerful for me too. And so I think every relationship and dynamic is going to have those different little nuances, but figuring out what feeds each other and the kind of support that they need, I think is incredibly important.
No, that's great advice. That's great advice. And well, transitioning from not important to less important, but from heavy good advice to let's bring into something fun before we close out. Because
here we go.
You answered. I was going to ask questions about balancing roles, but you answered that perfectly in your last answer. But
okay, thank you.
Tell me, what is it like being a DJ? Because I've caught your show a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I wish I could do the call in. And, like when I was a kid back in the 90s, the awesome times, you have like a local radio station here used to have the top 5 at 9, where you'd call in and you could like at 9 o'clock, they'd have the top 5 songs of the day, and you could announce one of the songs and, talk shit to your friends and like, hey, I'm on the radio. I'm famous now. That was reels before reels.
Yes, this is true.
So, you were cool because you'd have your tape in the tape deck and you hit the record and record yourself because, now you got your own demo track. But anyway, I'm old. So it would be so cool to call in and just like, hey, I'm on the radio. What's up? What's up, Tampa? Shout out, all that stupid shit. I'm going to take all this stuff out in post-production because I sound like a dope.
Don't you dare. Don't you dare.
What's it like being a radio host? That it's cool. You're playing great music. It's a bit of everything. And the music.
Yeah.
Childhood stuff.
It's really, I think I sort of mentioned it towards the start that how fortunate I am to be doing so many different little bits and pieces. And so a previous podcast guest, Josh Grandinetti, a firefighter captain out in Arizona, he has his own show on there. And him and I were chatting and he was like, I think like there could be something here, and introduced me. And so, yeah, they gave me a spot twice a week, 2 till 4 p.m., Tuesday and Thursday, Eastern Standard Times. And it's just fun. It's just, I try to give a bit of a mixture. So I try to bring a little bit of, my Erin Jane, like mental health and wellness tips and conversations and, little bits and pieces like that interspersed between the songs and some, playfulness and talking shit. And, I really try to, I guess, make an impact, even like I do on the things that I share on Instagram a lot of the time. I kind of try to reel you in with maybe a little bit of humor or a good song or something like that. But then there's typically like a message behind it. So it's there if you want to take it. If not, you can be like, what is this random Aussie chick talking about? Play the next song.
Yeah.
So, but I love it. It's so much fun. And yeah, they're an eclectic collection of music. Even blows my mind sometimes. So it's something that I really enjoy, and I think my bosses have been great, and they're like, oh, we're gonna include a little bit more like Aussie artists for you into like this next year, and they're sort of broadening their catalog a little bit too. So looking at putting some new songs in there, and maybe even giving me a little bit more creative control over some of the songs that I get to play.
What's the creative control? Do you get to choose it, or do they choose them for you?
At the moment, it's sort of like pre-programmed. Like they've sort of all like got it set up.
Just in case your taste in music is shit.
Well, there's a fair bit of like Nickelback and Creed on there, so I tend to struggle a little bit with that. I love it. I personally have quite an eclectic taste of music, and my husband's a big metalhead. So over the last 10 years, I've additionally kind of gotten like an education in terms of Iron Maiden and Metallica and Ronnie James Dio and all of the things that my husband.
I'm not familiar with one of those bands. Metallica?
Yeah, I know, right? Who would have ever thought of those? But my 8-year-old, even just like a couple of months ago, went to his second Iron Maiden concert. Like it's deeply ingrained in our family. So I love that eclectic nature. Then it'll go to like Dusty Springfield and Jerry Lee Lewis, or like there's just. I love that. That's kind of almost maybe a little bit more like my personality. Like I'm kind of bounce all over the place in terms of things I listen to, and I love that aspect of it, and just to kind of think that in a 2-hour spans, right? Like I only speak for a couple of minutes, at a time. And it's really more about the music. It's about, just helping someone get through a shift. But even Josh Granzanetti, the guy who introduced me, we did a 4-hour Christmas show together because him and I think operate on the same frequency in terms of all we're about are supporting the first responder community. And we were kind of like, hey, like, how can we do that a little bit more through the station? And so we asked our boss and we were like, can we jump on for, a few hours on Christmas Day? So anyone on shift at work is going to feel supported and feel that sense of camaraderie because we want to jump on and spend that time with you too. So it's really kind of about that and just having an audience to, slip a couple little mental health and wellness tips in there, or just opening up those things of conversations. And not every show gets like deep and meaningful. Sometimes I just like to riff and talk shit and share some war stories or anything like that. But it's just fun. And it's kind of like the one thing I do really for fun. Like the podcast is for pure just like enjoyment and connection and such a privilege. And the radio show, the Thin Line Rock Station, is just fun. So I'm really lucky that I get to do it. And people are always welcome to listen in. And additionally, you can always do a song request and I can share it and do a call and do it. Well, I mean, I did give you a shout out.
Yeah, I caught that. So I've not listened to an entire block, but I have jumped on.
Oh, that's it. We're done.
Well, no, I've jumped on Tuesdays and Thursdays here and
I'm
there
kidding.
Since you started this.
Yeah.
Like the first time when you did a shout out, I'm like, hey, this is great music too. And you sound like you were really having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I'm on the radio. Hey, everybody. LOL, I'm on the radio. That's coming out in production too. I look like a dope. But the music's great. You seem like you're having a lot of fun. And, I think dropping those little breadcrumbs in there and not being so serious, I think that shows you're definitely still getting the message out. And people are like, oh man, I didn't even think about that. And, here's the next song from Nickelback. And everybody gives Nickelback shit, but everybody knows a Nickelback song. So I don't want to hear it.
So no. So I made some joke to my boss and he was like, he's like, everyone shits on Nickelback and says that they don't like them. He's like, but we get data on, when people turn off or switch on or whatever else. He's like, our numbers don't drop significantly when Nickelback is played. He's like, so, but that is, I think, the good thing with the radio show, that even if not every song or every artist is your favorite, because it is so eclectic and it goes from every like opposite end of the spectrum. It's like, if you don't like one song, well then okay, you kind of like
just wait a few minutes.
Yeah. And then it'll be like, then you'll be like, oh my God, this is my favorite song. And that's kind of what I love too. I love sharing, like I think there was like the band's live. I don't know if it was like Dolphins Cry or whatever the song was that came on. And I'm like, it also helps me like reminisce. And I like the listeners to kind of get a bit of a sense of me and my personality, because I was like, that was like my first concert I went to as I was like a 15 or a 16-year-old that like I paid for tickets for. I lined up in the heat to get into the stadium, like sunburnt, like, but I got to go, see them. So sharing little tidbits like that, which I love the way that music brings you back into those beautiful parts of your life that you don't always think about.
Yeah,
So
Michelle loves live music. So concerts and all that stuff, going to Nashville and just sitting in the bars, that's her, completely her jam. Me, I love music because I actually mark time with music. Like I can hear an old song, but like, this is where I was, the smell in the air. I mean, this is, like this was, released on this day and whatever, not the date, but the year. I know where I was, hey, this is spring break, my junior year. I remember listening to this song. And when you do get control of the music, Goo Goo Dolls. You can never go wrong with Goo Goo Dolls. I love the 90s stuff.
God, yeah, I used to love the Goo Goo Dolls too. My husband frequently, dates himself with his music. I'm like, I drove across the country to this song with my cousin and and all that kind of thing. And maybe I don't know if it's like a girl thing, but I would always like attach songs to people. So like I was always a good rocking out one to like a good breakup anthem. They were some of my favorites.
Breakup anthem. I used to do the same thing, but I would not necessarily to people, but blocks of time.
Yeah.
So music is pretty awesome. So before we close out, any parting thoughts, any ideas, anything you want to get out there?
Oh, Jesus. I don't know. I think we've covered sort of most of it off. Like, thank you for having me. I have lots of people on and I don't expect to be a reciprocal guest. So this is a beautiful opportunity. And I just want to say thank you. If anyone wants to jump on the socials and follow me, they can find me at Erin Jane Coaching. Additionally, my website, if you are interested in learning more about what it is that I do, or if you're interested in receiving life and wellness coaching, even just to have a conversation and find out what coaching is, I'm always open to that. And I will hold space for your darkness. Episode 41 is a great place to start.
And so is episode 1. But I mean, instead of having to, don't mess with the filters. Just go with what's already on there.
But this was lovely, Doug. Thank you so much. And I spoke about it on the previous episode, but there are some people that I have made some really beautiful connections with through the work that I do and through social media and in particular through the podcast. And I classify you as one of those. And it's both a privilege and a pleasure to have met you and consider you my friend.
Well, thank you so much, Erin. This has been it's been a great day for me, and having been on your show was quite the honor. I learned a lot about. I'm learning a lot through this whole process. One, how to be a podcast host and actively listen, and also talk about myself, and not just the fun stuff I want to talk about, but the tough questions you pose to me. So it's been great, and I completely agree with you. This is about relationships. There's so many people in this space, and not all of them are doing it for the right reasons. So to be able to provide a platform for somebody who's not just collecting people, but trying to do the work too, it's been a pleasure to have you on. So
I appreciate that.
With that, it's time for the outro. So thank you for joining us for this episode of Tell This Story. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Erin. If you'd like to connect with Erin, you can find her at erinjanecoaching.com or on Instagram and Facebook at Erin Jane Coaching. Contact Erin for coaching services and mention that you heard her on Tell This Story, or even just say, Doug sent me, and you'll receive some money off. Be sure to check out her podcast, I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, and I recommend beginning again, December 20th episode and working your way back. Also, tune in to the Thin Line Rock Station and catch Erin every Tuesday and Thursday from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Download the app, subscribe, and follow. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating. Your support helps us share these stories with more people. You can follow me on LinkedIn and Instagram at Tell This Story, or visit Doug White Official. All the links will also be in the show notes. We'd love to hear from you, whether it's feedback, guest suggestions, or topics you'd like to hear. Thank you for tuning in to Tell This Story. The way forward begins here. We'll see you next time.